Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Illustration Department podcast. My name is Giuseppe Castellano. In this podcast, I talk to folks in illustration, graphic design, publishing, animation, and other creative fields about their work, the lessons they've learned, and the bumps and bruises they've experienced along the way. In this episode, my guest is comics creator, writer, and educator, Ali Fitzgerald. At some point in your artistic career, you need to ask yourself, what is it that I love to do? It's a simple question, but as Ali and I discuss, it is anything but simple to answer. Among the topics, we talk about where art and art education intersect with social justice. We look at the life and work of the great Käthe Kollwitz. And Ali reminds us of the power art can have, especially in trying times, to offer connection and solace. I hope you enjoy our conversation. That's the other thing too, I haven't quite mastered the sound on this. The past couple of episodes my audio sounds a little blown out, like I'm a little too close to the mic and I'm being a little too loud. So I'm just trying to feel out, like, where should my mic be now in this new configuration? Anyway.
I actually was talking to a friend yesterday who did a podcast, and she thought it went really well, and then she listened to it and she was like, totally in a pit of despair because of the way that she thought she came across in the podcast. I tend to just sort of not reread or look at or listen to anything that I do again.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, what good comes of reading an interview you gave in 2016 and you look at the answer and you're like, well, I would have definitely said something differently now. Well, of course you would. You're 10 years older. It's going to be okay. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, you do great. So.
Oh, well, thanks. I appreciate that. I noticed on your website that you're into 90s shows. My wife and I have been binging Northern Exposure the past couple of weeks.
That's a great one. Yeah.
It holds
up. I love that one. I haven't watched that actually since I was a child. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. That's good to know.
You should watch it again.
It's actually, that's always been on my list of shows to rewatch. I'm like writing it down in my notes app as we speak.
Nice.
I kind of forgot about it.
I mean, we're talking about Indigenous representation, strong woman lead character. Mm-hmm. Chris, the radio DJ, talks about gender fluidity. This is the early 90s, mind you. There are healthy, mature conversations about sex and sexuality. It's funny. It's calming. Mm-hmm. They're constantly playing jazz and reciting poetry. And Marie Sendak is mentioned a handful of times. What's not to love?
It's the perfect show, in other words.
Basically.
I feel like the calming aspect is really important nowadays. Like that's kind of a necessary component to my viewing experience.
We did the same thing with Cheers a couple of years ago. I won't say it's a coping mechanism, but it's nice to go to these shows when you're not feeling super good about the world.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I know it's a little embarrassing to think about like how much it helps to desensitize oneself a little.
It's almost as if, tell me you're sticking your head in the sand without telling me you're sticking your head in the sand. And there's only so much. It's not like I'm ignoring what's going on in the world. I'm quite upset about it for obvious reasons, to say the very, very, very least. But I do think some level of like, I need a couple of hours at the end of the day after all the news and all the work and all the personal stuff and professional stuff to just watch something that I can that's familiar, that I can anticipate.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the human brain was really equipped to take in as much information as we take in on like a daily basis. No, I mean, let alone apocalyptic information or things that like directly sort of threaten us. And I think, there has to be like release valves and nostalgia TV, comfort TV is definitely something. Last night I watched The Great Pottery Throwdown. That's also like a genre of television that I'm really into, is like craft reality shows.
Yeah, that's great. Well, speaking of doing stuff that you like, you said you came back to comics after a bit of a hiatus because you were feeling lost, not feeling super good creatively, and comics were a way for you to go back to something you really loved.
I thought about talking about that period in my life with you specifically because I think in some episodes you're pretty open about having experienced depression yourself.
Sure.
And it was, that was the first period of my life as an adult that I was really depressed. It was, I don't know how long ago, like 13 years ago.
Yeah.
And and I felt really helpless and hopeless. And I think part of that was losing like a sense of purpose artistically.
Mm-hmm.
And prior to that, I really did feel like a real drive to make paintings and installations. And I felt like I had some validation from the world, not the world. I mean, that's a large group of people, but like I felt within that world like pretty okay. And then suddenly it shifted, and I felt like I couldn't make paintings anymore. And I also didn't feel really like sort of a part of that community anymore. I mean, I moved to Berlin. That was part of the catalyst for my specific depression. But and then I kind of had to get really small. I also was broke, and I was teaching English, and I couldn't afford a studio. And so, I just had my room in Berlin to make things in.
Right.
And so everything kept getting smaller and smaller. I started with like huge paintings, and then I, made like mid-sized dioramas. And then finally I kind of rediscovered comics, which I had done as a kid. And I did them also in college, but then I stopped in grad school, because I went to grad school for painting, and it was frowned upon back then.
Yeah.
And then when I sort of couldn't do anything else, I just, I made comics, and I still have this folder called Sad Comics that I like never really look at. It's all these like really depressive comics that I made while listening to recordings of 1930s horror radio. So it's like just the darkest stuff and not particularly good either. That makes them sound like more interesting than they are.
I mean, what else are you going to listen to,
Yeah, exactly.
It was either that or Enya.
Yeah. I also listened to Rachel Maddow back then,
Sure.
And I can't listen to her anymore at all because of that. Like I listened to her during that period, and somehow like her voice and just personage in general is associated with that for me.
I have a few of those, for sure. Like there are some games I played, music I listened to. I didn't listen to a lot of music. That was the interesting thing about. I mean, I'm sure folks listening and you and a lot of people can sort of have similar. What am I trying to say? I don't think this is unique to me at all. But when I was going through my depression, I didn't want to listen to music. I didn't want to like do anything quote unquote normal. It just felt like I was faking it or something.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, I don't know what it means. Maybe it was just a reactionary thing. It doesn't mean anything. But when music was playing, this is all true. I'm not making this up. I'm not aggrandizing it, or I don't even know if I'm using that right word correctly. When music was playing, like I was in the car and by myself, and music was playing, I would put it down to almost mute. Like I can barely hear it. So it sounded like it was really, really far away. And for whatever reason, I'm sure maybe there's some psychiatrists or psychologists listening, and they can chime in and email me and be like, "Yep, that's a thing." It made me feel better. It did something to my brain because it maybe forced my brain to like work harder to hear it. And so sometimes I would just literally drive around, put on like Bill Evans or something really chill, and then turn it down almost all the way, and just literally just drive around Bay Ridge for a couple of minutes, and I felt better. I usually did it when I was trying to find a park, alternate side parking and stuff. So yeah, there are a couple of things that now I don't do because I know if I did them now, it would just kind of transport me back to that time, and it's not a time I want to go back to.
Yeah. No, but that's super interesting about your relationship to music. I guess maybe I had something similar because I listened to more podcasts than I ever listened to before and after.
Right.
And then specifically this genre and I haven't listened to horror, like vintage horror radio since then for the same reasons that you're describing. These capsules in our lives.
But it's nice to know. I mean, it's nice that you found that thing that you were refound or rekindled that love of comics. I mean, that's a tough question to answer. I've found with artists, with me, what do you really love to do? especially in times when things aren't going so well personally or globally or socially or how, financially or whatever. Like, what is it that you really love to do? It's a simple question that I think trips up a lot of us, illustrators especially.
Yeah. Actually, when I was like during this period when I was depressed, I went to New York and I saw a friend of mine, Gabe, who runs Desert Island Comics. He said something to me. I was just starting in comics, and he had said something to me that I think is like really profound and that I tell people all the time, which is I was asking him like all these deep questions about I don't know, careers in the comics and what to do and whatever. And he kind of looked at me and he was like, well, what do you want to do all day? And he's like, I like to like talk to people about books, and I like to get really like deep into learning about the bookmaking process, and so I sort of crafted my life around what I wanted to do.
Right.
And he's like, what do you want to do? I mean, just sort of like the kind of the mundane rituals of every day. Like, what do you want to spend your days doing? Because sometimes I think people think they want to do one thing, but they don't actually want to, I don't know, bookbind all day or.
Right.
But I like the idea of figuring out the shape of your day, like what you want your average day to kind of be.
Yeah, if I'm being honest with myself and the listener and you, Allie, if I'm answering that question, I'd probably say painting. And this is something that I actually have been thinking a lot about lately. As much as I say I'm an oil painter, how much do I oil paint? Not at all. Hardly any. Like, I'll paint only when I absolutely have to. That doesn't sound like an oil painter to me, even though I say like, oh, if I had all the time in the world and I was, independently wealthy, I would just be painting all day. Actually, if I'm being honest with myself, I wouldn't. I would be gardening all day, 1,000%.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And do you think it's because you enjoy the process of gardening more, or is it because there's something else?
Good question. Honestly, I think it's because with gardening, there is very little chance of failure. Like, I know what I'm getting when I garden. And
I beg to differ as someone who is really bad at it, but yeah, as someone who's killed many things. But yeah,
it's all about the balance of sun and water, Allie. If it doesn't have enough sun, don't give it a lot of water. If it has a ton of sun, give it more water. That's it. And don't water it.
Wise.
If it's wet, leave it alone. And sticking your finger in it like half an inch doesn't do jack. Like, you got to really dig your finger in there. And if it is bone dry, then water it fully in your sink, and then leave it the F alone until it is bone dry again.
Okay, this is good.
That's how you do it.
These are good tips.
Yeah, but like outside gardening, and I think there is zero chance of failure. I know what I'm getting, and I don't have to work that hard at it, and it's still creative. I still kind of do outside. I'm like, I'll plant this over here and this over here. And then when it grows in a couple of years, it's going to grow into this and it's going to look like this shape. And so it's very sculptural and I enjoy it immensely. I'll do it any minute of the day. Zero problem. No procrastination. But if I have to paint, oh my God, ripping my hair out. Even though I love painting.
I wonder if it's also because, there's so many more pressures associated with painting. There's just so much like baggage and history and then like, what people think of it and you. And there's a lot.
This podcast is produced by the Illustration Department, a global leader in online education for illustrators. Visit illustrationdept.com for offerings like mentorships and portfolio reviews, testimonials, our alumni showcase, our best-selling Substack, and more. That's illustrationdept.com. And now, back to our conversation. How would you define comics as an art form for people who maybe don't have as clear a definition as they should about it?
Well, sometimes when I teach a course called Visual Storytelling, I reference Scott McCloud's kind of seminal book.
Podcast guest, Flex.
Oh yeah. I haven't listened to that one. It's so the book was, what is this book called? Making Comics?
Understanding Comics?
Understanding Comics.
There was a second one, I think. Maybe a third one. I don't remember. But Understanding Comics is like the one. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's the one I use. He has a definition that I think is pretty good. I don't remember exactly. But I mean, it's sort of images in a sequence. more or less, right? That mostly tell a story, but not always. I also think maybe my definition's a little more expansive because, for instance, I did a comic called Hungover Bear and Friends for McSweeney's for 3 or 4 years.
I love that comic.
Thanks.
It's
and it was
great.
one panel. It
Yeah.
was one panel, which with Scott McCloud's definition would not constitute a comic, but it would be a cartoon,
Yeah,
I think.
I'm with you.
But I think in my slightly more expansive view of what a comic is, I would place it there. Images that are in some sort of sequence that often tell a story, but hashtag not always.
Not all comics.
Not all comics.
Yeah. You explore in your comics some pretty surrealistic nonfiction, as was described in one interview I read of yours. Subject matter, specifically, the immigrant refugee experience, and it isn't just all like lollipops and rainbows and superheroes.
Right, definitely not.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in some ways, unless you're being like sort of hyper meticulous about your documentation, the way that Joe Sacco is, I think that, a lot of nonfiction first-person comics are sort of inherently biased. I mean, we're all kind of flawed narrators, I think, in general.
Yeah.
Making that very clear and making it sort of surreal is one approach that I appreciate. Although, in that book, Drawn to Berlin, all the things that people say are accurate. They were like recorded, not with a recorder, but everything's kind of real in it, but twisted in a way to kind of, I think, hopefully expose the lens, like how blurry one's lens can be.
Sure.
Different passages, I think, have different levels of realism, but I think that's my general approach.
I think that book was published by, I don't have this in my notes, I'm going to go by my memory, Fantagraphics 2018.
Yeah, perfect.
Am I wrong?
Good job.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right.
Is it weird to you? Weird's not the right word, but it's the early morning and my brain's not working. I haven't had my fourth cup of coffee yet. Is it interesting to you that this isn't probably the first time you've talked about that book years later? I don't think I've ever asked this question on the podcast. Like, what is it like to talk about a book that you published many years later, and it's maybe the book most often brought up in conversations with you or interviews with you? Does that bother you? Or is it interesting to you? Does it? Or am I swinging and missing here?
No, I mean, I'm trying to think about it. I mean, it doesn't really bother me. I find it mostly interesting. I find it sad, actually, more than anything, because, the book talks about different types of migrant experiences. It talks a little bit. I use Joseph Roth's writings to talk about Berlin in the 30s, and I talk about my work, doing comic workshops in refugee shelters, and I talk a bit about myself, and I talk about Berlin, and everything felt bleak then, but there was sort of this feeling of possibility for the future, in terms of migration and making things, nation states, sort of richer with migration, and the rhetoric around migration back then was already kind of starting to shift.
Right.
And now it's become so dark and so it's almost like we can't even remember this era of relative openness, Right. So when people bring it up, I think I feel sad about the issues themselves. And that's kind of the first thing that comes to mind, that this is a document that sort of records like a time capsule, a period that was slightly more open and optimistic than, not slightly, that was more open and optimistic than now.
It's a little bizarre. We're talking about refugees and migrants, and the fact that this was 2018, we're now in 2025 in this recording, and that book could have been published today and hardly anything would have changed, except maybe it's a little more bleak.
Yeah.
This is something that I've been thinking a lot about lately, which I know you cover in your work, obviously, in your books and your work with refugees and immigrants, is how rhetoric about how immigrants bring crime and chaos into the towns and cities in which they settle is word for word what they said 100 years ago. Literally the same hateful shit about Mexicans and others in this country, in Germany, in wherever, were said of Italians, of Irish, of Germans in the 1920s and 30s. They're dirty, they're violent, they'll take your jobs. I mean, how are we still doing this?
I don't know. I mean, I think back then when I was reading the sort of 1920s journalism of Joseph Roth, who himself was Jewish, in Berlin, the way he wrote was so like in such a contemporary way, and the way he was sort of talking about the headlines of the day with, he was aghast, like, and it felt so eerily similar. How are we still doing it? I don't know. I mean, I think he was surprised in the 1920s that we were still doing it. Like, I think it's like
he laughs in desperation.
I think the idea that the moral arc of the universe bends towards justice and humanity is, I mean, maybe it does, but I think it goes in waves. And I think immigrants are always the easiest scapegoat, even though there's like virtually no evidence of any of this, people inventing statistics about crime and stuff. I mean, the other thing is that how individual stories sometimes kind of feel bigger and more potent than the actual factual story, right? So like a story about a migrant who kills someone, maybe like a young woman, becomes this huge thing that gets publicized everywhere. The faces, the names, and it becomes this stand-in for everyone. I mean, for all immigrants, because immigrants are the easiest scapegoats politically. I mean, as it's been for so long.
Right.
And so people pay attention to these horrific stories rather than, the actual facts, which is that migrants pay a lot of taxes. There's no discernible change in crime rates. Like, they add a lot. Germany, for instance, to use the example from drawn to Berlin, like Germany is in dire need of all kinds of skilled workers. I mean, not to mention like their demographic problems with an aging population. Like, they need immigrants, but immigrants are still demonized, and it's it's baffling on the one hand, and on the other hand, it's like it just feels like this thing that just keeps happening over and over again, despite it being completely illogical.
What I also find illogical is, and I was thinking about this morning as I was on my run, another flex right there. And
that is a flex.
Yeah. It was funny, like the first 5 minutes of our conversation, I was still sweating, even though I'd come in, hung out for a little bit, took a shower, got ready, prepared for our conversation. I sat down, I'm like still sweating, but I'm better now. Is this a couple of ideas? Like, first of all, well, personally, as a son of immigrants, there are quite a few members of my family who are on that side. And I'm like, how can you be on this side when, like, in the 60s and 70s, people were thinking this about you?
Yeah.
Well, we came here the right way and we worked, and like they work too, dude. Like, what's the problem? Also, and then it led to the other question I was having was, why do people give a shit?
Yeah.
Live your life. Let people live their life. What is the problem? Like, what? Like, is there nothing else going on in your life that you have to, angrily tweet and vote and do all of everything in between to prohibit other people from just like living a life?
Yeah.
Everyone wants the same thing. You want the best for your children and your family and for you, and so do they. It's
really ironic that so many people in the U.S. profess libertarian leanings, but they're all up in everybody's shit. Like, especially I would say right now, like trans people, like they want to dictate, how people live and identify. And it's disheartening, to say the least.
Right. I mean, I saw the other day, maybe it was yesterday, there was I think it's an LGBTQIA suicide hotline that the current administration is shutting down.
Yeah, I saw that too. I think it was RFK Jr. is the one that made that decision. The level of cruelty.
I mean, what else is it? Yeah, exactly. I wonder if there are one or two listeners right now who are like, dude, stick to illustration. Why get political? Life is political, man. I mean, you can't operate as an artist, as a human in a vacuum. We can't compartmentalize this. It's intertwined into our lives. For example, I would prefer not to field questions from my children. Genuine questions, not jokes, not silly questions. Like, are we going to be okay? Are we going into World War III? Are we invading Iran? What are we going to do? You know, my son is about to, you know, he's going to be of age for the draft. And they were genuinely talking about like, well, I mean, I guess I could be drafted. Maybe I'll be drafted next year. I mean, they were genuinely having conversations about this as we were having dinner the other night. And I'm just sitting here going like, Jesus Christ. Don't worry. It's not going to happen. I can hear people saying that. It's not going to happen. Okay. I mean, what else do we, I guess we'll just wait another couple of steps.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, anyway.
But it's also related in very real ways, like the same people who want to, you know, cut this suicide hotline for LGBTQIA youth. They're the ones that also want to cut NEA grants.
Correct. Oh, happened again. Darn it.
Yeah, I feel like I can sense my like blood pressure rising or something. And then off.
I'm using Ecamm Live. I might actually leave that one in. I'm going to leave that one. What is that? The fourth time that we've dropped out. If anyone from Ecamm Live is listening,
again, I am in the basement. So
I know, but still, I swear to God. Hey, anyone listening who has a better program that I could use to record audio only, separate audio tracks, maybe Squadcast or some other platform. If anyone out there is thinking like, oh, I have an idea, please email me because this is not working. Ecamm Live, you guys suck. Yeah, it's alarming. It's alarming. Yeah. And I'm not talking about podcast recording. I'm talking about the world.
Yeah. And I think it's hard to create in a time like this. It's really hard. I mean, that's something that's right. I think maybe your listeners like shouldn't be too hard on themselves about, because I know it's
exactly, Allie.
Yeah, you got to be gentle with oneself in these times.
Right. I have a text thread with a couple of my bros who are we're all creative in different ways, illustration or illustration adjacent, and both of them and me too, and we were all just kind of like, is it us? Is it me? Or is it just really, really hard these days to just be creative?
Yeah.
It's not you. It's really hard these days to be creative.
Mm-hmm. I think there was actually a New Yorker cartoon about this, like in the beginning of the pandemic. I could be wrong, but I remember there was like this little lifeboat and like a big wave was about to hit it.
Right.
And the person's like, why can't I start my debut novel or whatever, you know? And it's like, I don't know. I guess it's probably not funny to explain.
No, I'm smiling.
It's never funny to explain cartoons, actually. But it's anyway, it's hard to create under conditions that like this, I think, for everybody.
Hi, illustrators. The illustration department's summer sale is upon us. From July 1st through July 6th, mentorships, workshops, and portfolio reviews, led by me, are 15% off. Not only that, we're throwing in the option for a 1-month free trial subscription to my best-selling Substack. You can sign up during the sale and schedule your session or sessions later. To take advantage of this rare sale, visit illustrationdept.com/classes. Now back to our conversation. How did you start writing and illustrating for the New Yorker, the New York Times, and other periodicals?
Well, for the New Yorker, it was through Hungover Bear. I joined Twitter just for Hungover Bear because McSweeney's is a literary magazine, and they were posting on Twitter, and so I would just repost. Right. The assistant editor, cartoon editor at the time, started following me, or I think maybe liked a Hungover Bear. His name is Colin Stokes. He was super great. And then I felt like I could pitch him. I think maybe I contacted him on Twitter asking if I could pitch, and he said yes. Yeah. At the time, Bob Mankoff was the cartoon editor at the New Yorker, and I think whatever I pitched, it didn't work. I can't remember if it was cartoons, which is not something I usually do, or something else, but they didn't say yes. But it was still kind of I think a nice interaction.
Yeah.
After Trump won the first time, I don't know. This is actually a time when I felt like it could be productive. I kind of like locked myself in my apartment for a couple of days, and I made comics. And one of the comics I made was this post-election nihilist horoscope, and it was like exactly the way it sounds. Mm-hmm. And I pitched that to Colin, and he said yes. So that was my first time working at the New Yorker, and then we did a few more while Bob Minkoff was the editor, and then Emma Allen took over.
Yeah, I reached out to her to be on the podcast, and she wrote back a very, very kind no. Mm-hmm. But it was nice, so she's still invited to my party.
She's super nice, and I think very accessible too. I think she's really changed the sort of humor and cartoon department. She's like, sure. I don't know, I find it much more contemporary. I find like it reflects my experience more.
Sure.
And I think also more open to different types of visual stories and different types of visual storytelling.
Yeah.
Back in the Minkoff days, it was mostly cartoons. But I think with Emma, there are more long-form comics. Mm-hmm. There are more interactive comics, actually, more animated comics. One of them got the Pulitzer Prize. I think it was like, Is My Toddler a Stochastic Parrot? That was an animated one. I forget the author's name.
That's all right. I'll look it up and put it in the show notes.
Nice.
Speaking of looking things up, while doing research for you, I was happy to see that one of your influences, in addition to Bill Watterson, Gary Larson, Emil Ferris, and others, was Käthe Kollwitz.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we're recording this in mid-June. Her birthday is coming up. She was born on July 8, 1867.
Yeah.
And this is a long time ago, and this is, again, kind of going back to what we were talking about. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, she has this quote that applies as much today, if not more so today, than it did when she said it. Mm-hmm. She said, "My work is not pure art, but it is art nonetheless. It is all right with me that my work serves a purpose. I want to have an effect on my time in which human beings are so confused and in need of help."
Yeah, I mean, she also was like against both world wars, like lived in Berlin through both world wars. Yeah. I think in the second one, she was in like the German countryside or something. Lost at least one of her sons, maybe more. I think her husband was also he was a doctor for the poor, and would treat these people in Prenzlauer Berg, not far from where he lived in Berlin. And back then, it was considered like the slums, and there were all these diseases that were associated with that, and with living closely or living sort of in dense environments. And her husband would treat these people, and she would draw them, and she embedded herself within certain communities. And I think she was really like a powerful instrument to show different types of pain, and actually different types of disease also, and despair and the effects of war. I think she actually had a really big effect on like the sentiments of people about war, like showing its horrors. And in the middle of Berlin, there's one of her sculptures, and it's a mother holding a dead son. Yeah, although my favorite of hers are her etchings and drawings.
Oh my God, they're so beautiful.
She was also a good sculptor.
Yeah, I mean, her work did center on victims of injustice, poverty, famine, war. Mm-hmm. She did lead a hard life, though. I mean, you're right. Her son died in World War I. Her grandson died in World War II. Mm-hmm. A year after he died during the war, her home, along with all, if not most of her work, scratch that, flip it, most, if not all of her work, was bombed out of existence. And then she died 2 years later. But today, I mean, she's an absolute legend. I mean, she's honored for that advocacy for victims of injustice. There's a Käthe Kollwitz museum. Mm-hmm. There's a Kollwitzplatz. Is that what it is? Is that where it is? Kollwitzplatz?
Actually, I don't think that's where the museum is. There's her house, which is in Prenzlauer Berg, and I think the museum is in the west of Berlin somewhere.
Gotcha. How would you pronounce her name in German, proper German?
Käthe Kollwitz.
Okay, so I'm way off.
I think it's pretty close. But Kollwitzplatz is like this kind of twee, very gentrified place where they have like a weekly organic market now.
Oh, good.
But yeah, it is.
That sounds nice. And there's a bunch of schools named after her. There's a prize named after her. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's amazing. So people who are listening, if you don't know who, I'm just going to say it my way, Käthe Kollwitz is, you need to remedy that today. Oh my gosh. Are you serious? That happened again? I hate this platform so much.
It's just little mini podcasts.
I mean, like maybe I'll just, over the next 5 weeks, I'll just do like 5 15-minute long, 10-minute long podcast episodes. Anyway, I'll just to thread it through to the previous clipping. Look her up. She's amazing.
Yeah, definitely. I think also just sort of, I don't know, like Michelangelo or Da Vinci level drawing skills.
Oh, 100%.
Someone 100%. To study, like the way she draws is.
Yes. I don't care what style you work in. You should look at her. If you want to learn more about drawing, look at her drawings. Mm-hmm. Hey, maybe one day there'll be an Ali Fitzgerald Prize presented at like the Frankfurt Book Fair or something for folks who use their art for good. Who do we call to make that happen? Let's make a phone call.
Yeah, let's do it.
Bologna. ALA. We'll do the ALA. We'll call somebody. I'll head over to Philadelphia in a couple of weeks and talk to somebody about it. What's multimodal mean? You refer to yourself as a multimodal artist.
I just think it means having different modes of working or like maybe different mediums.
I figured.
I think I was just trying not to use multimedia, but to be honest, my partner helped me with that part and suggested the word multimodal. And I was like, all right, that sounds good.
Yeah. I love that. And I dig it. And it reminded me of this is years and years ago. I got for like 17 seconds all excited about the word polytechny. I discovered that that's a word. And what it means is you're somebody who does many things, period.
Oh, that's
fun. You're a polytechny.
That's fun.
Yeah. Like a polytechnical school is a school where you learn.
Don't go to
things.
A Berlin party and introducing yourself as polytechny.
Why not? What kind of look am I going to get?
I think people would be like, really? Like, well, I mean, people would be like, what's that, right? But it would definitely be interpreted within, I think, like a romantic or relationship kind of spectrum.
Okay.
Like polyamorous, but like polytechny. People would be intrigued. They'd be like, so, is it that you like to get technical with things? Or like, I don't know how people would interpret it, but I definitely think it would be interpreted within a sexual / romantic lens.
Well, you know me, I like to party. That's the last thing I need. I'll walk around and be like, oh, I'm a polytechny. And then somebody tweets, Giuseppe Castellano's polyamorous. Everyone needs to be aware of that. That'll be an enjoyable couple of months on social media. So I'll just go ahead and not do that. But I think that's a sound move on my part. Yeah. Speaking of sound moves, what piece of advice, word of wisdom, little insight, something that you'd like to share with listeners about comics, about art, about using your art to help others, about anything from you to them?
I mean, it's a big one to use your art to help others because I don't always believe in the power of art. I sometimes do. I often do, but I don't always. I mean, I think it's a faith that can get shaken.
Right.
Because, it's more important for someone to have stable housing and have food than it is for them to draw a picture. Like it just is. But sometimes I go in and out of thinking that, art is pointless, or sometimes I think it is the point, because what is anything worth if we can't actually sort of take time to express ourselves and to try to understand one another?
Yeah.
I think it's important in most creative fields to kind of find kernels of honesty or authenticity, because I think that's what resonates with a lot of people. And I think it gives people kind of a lot of solace, right? to know that others feel the same way or experience some of the same things, and to see your experiences kind of mirrored can be a powerful thing. I think also, even in satire, like when I write comics for the New Yorker, I'm always looking for kind of the thing that either I feel like could be a collective feeling, or something specific that I am experiencing or have experienced that would resonate with people. I don't know, somehow it's merging the general with the specific, which isn't always easy. It's not an easy like needle to thread, but it's definitely worth practicing.
To learn more about Allie, visit alliefitzgerald.com. If you find value in this podcast, you can support it by subscribing to my best-selling Substack. For $5 a month or $50 a year, you will access hundreds of articles on the art, practice, and history of illustration, unlock bonus podcast episodes called Extra Credit, and connect with other members of the ID community. Join me on Substack by visiting illustrationdept.substack.com. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.